everyone for joining us for another episode of our Spotlight series brought to you in partnership with Dentons. My name is Juliette Chelleroux, and I'm the co-founder of Proptech Collective, a not-for-profit community focused on bridging the communication and knowledge silos between the PropTech and real estate worlds. I'm grateful to be joined today by my co-host, Kenda Shaheen, who I will invite to introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kenda Shaheen, and I'm a senior associate with Dentons Venture Law Group in Toronto. My practice focuses on all things startup and emerging growth, from pre-seed to exit and everything in between.
Thanks, Kenda. And every month we've partnered up to highlight the diverse stories of founders, investors, and change-making real estate professionals that are part of the Proptech Collective community. We love to make the most out of the short time that we have together to learn more about their experience and trends that they're seeing in the space. So today we're super thrilled to have Nathan Mah, the co-founder of Mero, join us. Welcome, Nathan.
Thank you, everyone. Yeah, thanks, Julia. Thanks, Kenda. Really glad to be here.
Glad to have you as well. So how about we kick it off with you telling us more about your journey up to founding Mero. So what makes you who you are and what led you to where you are now?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, my background has actually always been through a lens of entrepreneurship. My family's all entrepreneurs actually themselves. So we have a family business on the west coast of Canada, or not so much the coast, but in the prairies in Alberta. And so I grew up in their family business kind of every day, seeing practices of entrepreneurship. You know, we really went kind of forward in things, and they supported me throughout my journey, even when I chose to be an entrepreneur coming out of university, which is not always the easiest choice. So I'm lucky enough to have had that support growing up.
That's amazing. Having spent a lot of times with entrepreneurs, having a support system is great, and it's lucky that you have it in your family.
Yeah, it's interesting to have the history and sort of seeing it and growing up with it, and to not sort of be a first-time entrepreneur in some ways. But obviously the context of what you're doing now is probably very different from what your family did. For our listeners who don't know what Mero does, could you walk us through what the company is, what the business is, and the gap that you saw in the market for the solution that it provides?
Yeah, for sure. So, you know, really, you know, from my kind of personal experience, I was fortunate enough to work in internships in real estate development in Southeast Asia between my degree. And then when I came back to Canada to do my master's degree at Queen's, that's when I met my co-founder. And it was really his sort of background and experience working for a large property management firm in Toronto and working in sort of the operations side of the business. His job was to sift through manual cleaning logs, actually. So we've all seen these pen and paper logs that are kind of tacked on the back of the door of the restroom. He sifted through every single one of those, put them into an Excel spreadsheet, and then that sheet became the single source of truth for you know, multi-million-dollar contract renewal decisions. So obviously a very time-consuming, very manual sort of process. And that's when we met in university. So, you know, myself with a business background, him with the technology background as a computer engineer, you know, we really kind of brought our sort of understanding or mutual understanding of, you know, commercial real estate and commercial property management specifically, and started working on Mero. So, you know, what Mero does is solve that core pain point. It's always been our thesis. You know, we help improve the efficiency of cleaning staff and improve efficiencies for commercial property managers. And we really focus on the cleaning vertical.
It's awesome to see how an idea from university, essentially a pain point from an internship, can turn into, you know, a venture capital backed business. And I just love hearing that. I guess on that note, you know, no path is linear in building a startup, especially the path of a startup. So I'd be curious to kind of understand from you and also from your co-founders, I guess, journey as well. Like, what was the process that you went through from start to finish to even start building out what you guys have at Mero?
Yeah, so I mean, it really extends off that initial meeting. Yeah, when I met Cole, we the first proof of concept for Mero was basically an Arduino strapped to a 3D printed shell. It didn't look pretty by any means, but we were able to talk to customers and put that into pilot sites. It's really the initial way for any business to start is talking to your initial customers and finding a way to test the product in order to kind of get validation for it. So we really put that hardware into client sites. We were able to test it, and we were fortunate enough to have kind of some of good backing from both the university and from the community in Kingston, where Queens is located. And actually, our first pilot site was in a healthcare facility associated with the university. So with that sort of momentum, we were able to quickly grow it, eventually move it to Toronto. And that was kind of the momentum that we needed to get the product out, validate it, and start to develop an MVP.
So I'm curious, just that you said that you started in healthcare, which is kind of a very interesting market to kind of dive into and try to have that as your first pilot. Curious to know, are you still in that vertical now? And from those pilots and where you are today, what are some of the lessons learned of what worked and what didn't work?
Yeah, so that pilot really gave us a lot of learnings that we needed to kind of validate our customers. We initially started targeting commercial cleaning companies, as we thought that they would be sort of best suited for it. They were also much more approachable. So when we were doing our initial cold calls and calling out to commercial cleaning companies, they were much more approachable than, say, a big commercial property management firm, where who knows who you would even pick the phone and dial. So we were actually kind of fortunate. We a lot of times reached the owners of cleaning companies directly. And we reached one of our major current partners on the phone, and we actually connected right to the executive VP at that time, and he brought us into one of his client sites. So a major commercial office here in downtown Toronto. That was really our first foray into the commercial real estate sector. And from there, we realized that, this is something that's much, much bigger than, just commercial cleaning. Well, while that's a pretty major market, the real estate side of it could be much greater. And we really started to tailor the solution for that target market instead of just solely commercial cleaning. It's developed to really impact a lot of people in different verticals, but we've been focusing on commercial office as a key sector, but we also have deployments throughout healthcare. We have it in universities, hospitals, so it's starting to expand quite a bit into other verticals as well.
That's awesome. I'm curious. I mean, I'd be remiss, and I think our listeners would also be curious to know, given the nature of the business, the pandemic, I guess a lot of companies faced some challenges in the pandemic. I suspect for you, and correct me if I'm wrong, that the nature of your business probably put you on a catapult and sort of forced you to generate and innovate more quickly and push. So I'm just curious about your experience through, I guess, the beginning of 2020 till now.
Yeah, it's funny. Obviously we had this idea, way before COVID was even sort of a concept. But just like you're alluding to, it definitely was a really strong tailwind for us. We definitely were benefited from the kind of state of the way things were after the pandemic. It turned the whole industry on its head, and everybody's really really smart people are starting to think about what the future of work looks like, and that's really where we fell into. So immediately after the pandemic, obviously safety was our first priority, with our employees, with our staff. But as we started to get into month 3, month 4, month 5 into lockdowns and the pandemic, and we had that first initial sort of slow return to work, property managers were tasked with sort of this variable occupancy problem, as we kind of called it. So sometimes a building would have 10% of people in there, sometimes it would have 20%, and there wasn't really a solution to understand what was happening on a real-time basis for specifically for cleaning staff. And obviously, cleaners in the buildings, they wouldn't have to be at a full workload as they were prior to the pandemic. So that particular use case and solution really sort of magnified our growth. We grew 3x over the course of the pandemic from about May until September 2020. And that's what really led us to, kind of realize a lot of, really solid progress for the business. We were able to raise a round and continue on our path towards, that future of work as we stand today in 2022.
That's awesome.
That's awesome. And it's super interesting because, we started off with like your journey and you said that it was an Arduino that barely looked like what your product looks today. And it's really interesting to see how, you kind of moved into this aspect of becoming a data first company, like helping people make better decisions about how they allocate resources and inventory management, etc. So I'm curious, obviously data is critical to the business that you're building. So I'm curious to know, like, with all the data that you have and the clients, like, have there been any surprising or interesting insights that you can share that have come from deploying Mero?
Sure. Yeah. So a lot of times, we're sort of miscategorized as a hardware company. We really look at ourselves as you said, a data company or a software, empowered by hardware. And I think we're able to do this in 2022 much more effectively than we ever have. Sort of supply chain issues aside, it's much more efficient and cost effective to build low cost hardware using IoT devices. So I think that's sort of the key sort of paradigm shift that we noticed as we started to grow and scale, was the sheer amount of data that we're collecting. So obviously on consumables, so paper towels, toilet papers, garbage bins, but also on the actual cleaners themselves. We have what we call a beacon product that we provide to the cleaners that tracks their location, so we can determine how long is it taking for specific cleaning tasks, how many times have they visited specific areas, are they cleaning in a way that we would deem sort of like effective or efficient, and starting to expand this beyond just restroom areas, so into workspaces where people are more and more concerned about whether or not their area has been cleaned and sanitized than they have ever before. So we really have kind of grown our data collection abilities, and it was really actually a sort of growing pain for us as we started to scale, because we had so many insights that we wanted to create for our customers that with a standard sort of process that we were using in the past wouldn't have worked. So we recently shifted to a sort of a more efficient data process where we can, for example, do algorithms in the cloud, and we can sort of deploy those to customers much faster. And we're going to actually release some blogs about this in our engineering blog in the near future. So really exciting that we're at that point where we feel like we're really innovating when it comes to our data collection and, more importantly, data reporting. And we're pretty excited to be at the forefront of that for the commercial property management industry.
That's awesome. I was gonna say, do not automate yourself outside of a job. So
what's interesting that you talk about commercial real estate, in my view at least, and I think others might agree, is it's a pretty like old school industry in terms of how it operates, right? Like it's almost as bad as the law, I should say, in terms of picking up technology. So, in the last 5 years and since starting Mero, have you noticed any trends in the way like commercial real estate players are interacting with tech? Like, we're obviously starting to see this idea of Proptech and it infiltrating, but I'm curious to understand your view and how you see sort of these big players that are historically kind of like paper and pen folks adopt technology, whether it's Mero or otherwise.
Yeah. So while I started the conversation sort of, making a little jab at, commercial real estate, how it's pen and paper, I would actually give them a lot of credit in the sense that the thoughtfulness and the level of sort of depth that we see a lot of our customers and partners thinking about how technology is going to affect the future of the workplace, but on commercial real estate has been really unparalleled. While it's a symptom of it is it might be moving a little bit slower than we would like as a startup who needs to move really fast. The really nice kind of advantage of it obviously is sort of the scale and the buy-in that you get from really close partners. So one of our key customers, they've really started from the top down, really building sort of like a data lake strategy, building what they kind of foresee as, the key vendors and the key verticals that they need to a smart building strategy. And really kind of putting those pieces together from the top and then starting to pick the vendors that really fit that vision. Just like a startup, you need to start with the vision before you really start to execute and put in the pieces in place. Otherwise, you're really setting yourself up for failure. So we've seen sort of our most forward-thinking customers being at the forefront of that depth of thinking and strategy. So I would give the industry a lot of credit in that sense, in that it's not haphazard. They're not throwing this in to try to get 10% ROI. They're trying to get it for 1,000 or 10,000% ROI over the next 10 to 20 years. And I think the scale of this industry really leans itself towards making decisions in that way. And for us as startups, we just have to position ourselves to be able to last for the long term. It's not a 5-year plan, maybe a 10-year plan, or even 15 or longer. So I think those are important things for us as startups when we're coming against slow moving objects like the commercial real estate industry.
Meaningful change, not just change, meaningful change.
Exactly.
There's a big difference, obviously.
Yeah, and I think you kind of touched upon this, but I'd like to dive in a little bit deeper, because obviously your insights in working with this industry and getting to a sense of adoption, like, tech adoption in real estate is happening now. COVID has been a forcing function to help, accelerate that process a little bit more, especially in areas like, cleanliness factors where you play. But I'm curious, like, what advice would you give to other startups that are looking for commercial real estate players to adopt their technology?
Yeah, so I mentioned our first conversations started with a key partner that helped, bring us into their clients' sites, and I think that would be my advice: is start with channels and find your ways into buildings with key partners, but then scale with direct. I think that's sort of the kind of really key sort of rule of thumb that I would say is, early on, you're going to need some references, and you're going to need some clients or customers that can be sort of your true champions, and they're going to need to really speak on your behalf in a lot of cases in the early days. But as you start to grow and you start to get to a solid footing, you need to amplify that message and go direct as quickly as possible. I think there are cases where companies might rely on channels for too long, and they never find a way to reach their customer base directly and find the persona and find the right people to talk to at those organizations. So I think that's sort of a transition that we went through our own experience. So that would be my rule of thumb: is start with channels, scale with direct.
And in your experience, what has been the hardest or most unexpected part about taking the entrepreneurship path? I know it's in your family, it's probably in your blood, but what have you found to be the most challenging?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely times where I don't feel like I was born to do this at all. I think that, like you said, there's so many unexpected things that come up that there's no way that you can really prepare for them. So, I mean, I find myself always really thinking about, things even in my off time, and that's something I never really thought. I don't think many people can understand how enveloped you really become in a business unless you've really been in it. Obviously, we all have our passions and our interests, but even if you're trying to take time off or you're away from the business, the amount that you think about it and really get deep into it, that was very unexpected. And I think until you've started a business or had something that takes up this much amount of your time, you don't realize how much of your identity it starts to become.
No, I think that's interesting. And I guess, like, you become one with your business, whether or not you like it, because as you say, time is of the essence. And I think everyone tries to optimize for using that time as efficiently as possible. So curious to maybe end it on a fun note. We didn't prepare you for this, but we tend to ask rapid fire questions to all of our guests that are a bit, gentle, but kind of talk to you less so than what a founder, response would be, but more of what does Nathan think and who are you as a human? Because, relationships are what make the world go round at the end of the day. So we'll kick it off. I'll start off with the first one, but curious to know, what's a book that you always recommend or a podcast?
Sure, I'll give one of each. So book, The Hard Thing About Hard Things by Ben Horowitz, I think is I'm sure you hear it all the time, but that one is, I think, in another tier for me. 0 to 1 is another book that I would put close to that.
Thiel. Yeah.
The Peter Thiel book, yeah. And then podcast, I mean, I'm always impartial to Tim Ferriss. He's actually a big reason about why I wanted to get into tech startups, back, in the early 2013, 2014 period. And yeah, so those would be kind of the books and podcasts that I'd recommend.
Awesome. What's your favorite place other than home?
Favorite place other than home? Anywhere that I can play golf. Yeah, that's a big passion for mine. So yeah, I talked about always thinking about work in other places. That's usually where I'm thinking about it, is when I'm on the golf course.
Not a bad place. Not a
bad place. I love it. I think we should try it out one time. But are you a morning or an evening person?
My co-founder thinks I'm an evening person because he's an extreme morning person, but I actually consider myself a morning person because I'm around a lot of evening people. So it's a bit of a both answer.
You're a founder. 24 hours.
Yeah, exactly.
So no 6 a.m. tea time is what you're saying.
Yeah, I'm not quite a 6 a.m. person, I'll be honest.
And what's one small thing you want to be better at doing, or something that you'd like to learn to do this year, like a sport, a hobby?
Yeah, so I guess sport wise, I've always been interested in like water sports. I never got a chance to do that much in Alberta. People have told me to try sailing. I've never done that before. Nice. It kind of terrifies me a little bit to be out there on a boat not knowing what to do at all, but that's something I'd like to try with someone who knows exactly what they're doing.
Yeah, too bad there isn't someone like that for entrepreneurship, right?
Yeah.
Okay, and Nathan, if you didn't start Mero, what would you be doing now?
That is a good question. I don't really know. I would like to say I'd be, as passionately involved in some other endeavor as I am currently, but I maybe I would like to say that I'd be doing something involved in like public health, or like something to do with like addiction or addiction counseling and those types of things. That was kind of one of my other interests or other passions before I went into business.
Awesome. Wow, that's like, it's very so like a great response. I haven't heard that one before, so
no, but it's also very aligned. So you're kind of close, tangential to healthcare right now, so it's nice. Maybe
it's adjacent
journey. It's adjacent. Yes.
Yeah. And one last question for you. This isn't really rapid fire, but the Proptech Collective is a community after all, and as a community, we would like to support each other as much as possible. So if you have any asks for the Proptech Collective community, whether it's hiring, a next capital raise, conversations with customers, what would it be?
Sure. Obviously, introductions into our kind of target market and anyone in the property management industry would be no doubt an ask, but I'm always open to connect to anybody anywhere. Obviously these days things are much easier to connect on a call like this than they were in the past, but anyone in Toronto, happy to grab a coffee, and anybody else, happy to hop on a Zoom call just to connect and chat a little bit more.
Awesome. And I'm assuming people can find you on LinkedIn or go on your website. How can people get in contact with you?
Sure. Yeah, LinkedIn. You can look me up, Nathan Mah. I live and breathe Mero, so you can also find me through our website. And I'm not very active on Twitter, so I won't really recommend that way.
It's okay. Neither am I. I find it's too hard to keep up with so much information. But Nathan, thank you so much for your time today. And also many thanks again to Kenda and Dentons for helping us bring the Spotlight series to life. For all of our listeners, if you share the same values or have an active interest in building up your professional network in the PropTech ecosystem, we encourage you to follow us on LinkedIn and Twitter and consider joining as an official member. We have both free and paid company memberships. So as also, we're always open to your feedback on future topics of interest. So if you have any suggestions, please get in touch with us at hello@proptechcollective.com. Thanks everyone again for tuning in, and I hope you guys have great weeks ahead.
Thanks.
Thanks for having me.